Breathe. Breathe, everybody breathe. Good morning.
Good morning.
Do you ever feel like Eeyore? I often feel like Eeyore. The best word to describe Eeyore is a fancy word, anhedonistic. Now, a hedonist is somebody whose life is all about their own pleasure. So an anhedonistic person is a person who is completely unable to experience pleasure at all, kind of like Eeyore. So Eeyore is a pessimistic, gloomy, depressed, anhedonic, old gray stuffed donkey. I feel like Eeyore sometimes, do you? And I meet lots of Eeyores in my life, don't you? You do. People whose very presence lowers the tone in the room. You see them coming and you immediately start planning all the reasons you should be somewhere else, right? Yeah, I gotta go. They might be depressed. They're certainly depressing. I once heard a psychologist, and if you're a person who's experienced depression in your life, you might not like this, but it could also be very liberating. This psychologist said, depression isn't something that happens to you. It's something that you do. So here I am, I'm depressing again. So just, if that little tidbit is useful to you, take it. If you don't like it, leave it. But Eeyore goes around saying things like, must that sun shine so brightly? Nobody loves me, everybody hates me, I'm going to the garden to eat worms, that one, remember? Nobody ever calls me or comes to visit me. Now, I don't know about you, but there's nothing I would rather not do than go visit somebody who's always saying, nobody comes to visit me. You know what I'm saying? We've all met them. So where am I going with all this? Well, I guess there's two things that I want to say. One is that nobody else is going to fix all the things that are wrong in your world. It's all up to you. It really is all about you, all about me. You'll never fix them all. And the second thing is you will fix all of the things that are wrong in the world. Because there's always going to be stuff in our worlds, big worlds and our little worlds that are wrong, right? Always going to be there. But you can become unaffected by them. You can become unattached to them. You can always choose how you respond to them. So you can turn away from them and notice all the things that are right in the world. Let's count your blessings. Grandma always said that, right? On the bright side, oh, Eeyore isn't there anymore. Okay, you saw the picture of Eeyore. He was turning around, right? Did you notice? He was turned around. He was taking the first step, turning around, looking in the other direction. And you've all heard it before, and I'm going to get Leslie to put up the next slide. Einstein said it this way. We can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them. How basic is that? We can't solve the problems by still thinking in the same old ruts. We've got to turn our thinking around. And then Ernest Holmes said this, turn away from the problem, turn entirely away from the problem. Look in its opposite direction, because the problem is never, the solution is never where the problem is, right? It's not even in the same area. It's not even in the same direction. It's in a completely different direction. So turn away, look in the opposite direction. And I often wonder if that isn't what Jesus meant when he said, turn the other cheek. This cheek, that cheek. I'm looking in the opposite direction. Turn away. Don't always be focused on the problem. You know how easy that is when there's a problem in our life to have our life be all about that, foremost in our mind all the time. We've got to turn away. Anybody ever watch the news? Turn the other cheek. Does anybody let negative people into your life? Now, I'm not saying be cruel and turn your back on people if you can help them in some way. But if they won't accept your help, if they're more attached to being able to tell their problems than they are to solving their problems, turn away. Turn your back on them if you have to. Turn the other cheek. As goodness knows, there are enough people out there who can benefit from what you have to offer. Don't waste your breath. It's like kids. You know how often you try to give your children advice? If they haven't asked for it, save your breath. Yeah? Why cast your pearls before swine? We had a teacher in nursing training many, many years ago, and she was always saying, for some reason, she'd get down around the ground and say, don't cast your pearls before swine. And that's part of the message from the Sermon on the Mount. And the Sermon on the Mount is widely thought to contain the gem of what the meaningful and real part of the Christian message is all contained there in the Sermon on the Mount. The rest of it's just decoration. So the Sermon on the Mount contains the Beatitudes and the Lord's Prayer, as well as many pieces of instruction and advice. And this particular one says, do not give what is holy to the dogs, nor cast your pearls before swine, lest they trample them under their feet and turn and tear you in pieces. That's pretty heavy duty stuff, isn't it? So if you've got wisdom, save it for the people who ask for it. Save it for the people who express a willingness to learn from your wisdom. Don't throw away your good stuff. So sometimes you need to not only turn your back, but you also need to walk away from some people. Anybody ever had anybody in their life that they just needed to leave them behind? Don't even allow these people in our world, because chances are they're not going to miss you anyway. Yeah? Think of those people that you didn't want in your life. Probably they didn't really want you either. On the other hand, if we do wish to keep those people in our lives, what we need to do is to refuse to focus on the problem aspects, those troublesome aspects of the relationship. Don't have our attention be on that. You know how when you're in love and you get married and everything suddenly your husband or your spouse does something disgusting or thoughtless. And all of a sudden, whenever you think of the husband or wife, that's all you think about is that disgustingness, right? Am I the only one? So if I can succeed in seeing that person in a higher way, because, you know, when we get into a relationship with somebody, we're accepting a package. We're accepting all the things we fall in love with and all the things we don't like. And you can't have just one, because there aren't any people like that in the world. So if we let the problems in the relationship define our relationship with them, it's not going to work. But if we can succeed in seeing them from a higher place, it's like the responsibility comes back over here again. If I can see you in a higher place, not if I can get you to raise up to a higher place, but if I can see you in a higher place, and I release my attachment to the flaws. Sometimes we get so attached with what's wrong with some people, it's just like a magnet that it keeps them glued to our sides. Yeah, you've met somebody like that. So I don't kick people out of my life. I release my attachment and they disappear. If somebody's bothering me, I'm attached. I'm at the effect of them. So I release my resistance and they no longer persist. I think it was Carl Jung that first said, resistance causes persistence. Y'all know that. I don't know why you didn't shout it out. Why don't we do that? Resistance causes persistence, right? And that's totally consistent with Unity's teaching, that we attract into our lives that which we focus our attention upon. It's the law of attraction. And lately, actually, people have been saying it's not that we attract those things to us, it's we attract ourselves to those things. We attract ourselves to circumstances. So you all know Murphy's Law, right? Anything that can go wrong will go wrong. Well, if that is true, wouldn't the opposite also be true? Anything that can go right will go right. Which one do you choose? Mindy Odlin, who's the founder of the Spirit Groups program that we're going to be introducing in January, she's written a book called What If It All Goes Right? What about that? What if it all goes right? And sometimes How often when someone has told you of a new plan they've got or a new idea, something they want to do, what's the first thing we do? Yeah, but what if something goes wrong, right? What if we greeted that with, yeah, and what if that all goes right? How empowering that could be. So we use this negative interpretation of Murphy's Law. We use it to keep us on our toes, to keep us alert against failures and breakdowns. And it's useful. It's a good thing to be prepared and have contingency plans. But it's an even better thing to be prepared for positive events. Remember, whatever can go right will go right. That's an astounding statement, isn't it? So when we do have a negative event, there's a whole process that we go through in our minds. In a negative process, something goes wrong. We notice that something went wrong. We take action to minimize the damage or loss. And then we take action to correct the process. Then we clean up any mess. And then we plan to do it differently next time. Yes, is that what we do when something goes wrong? But what about when something goes right? It's just, oh, hooray, good, let's go out and have a beer, right? But when something goes right, we don't make use of that process for our future planning. We don't take notes of how did we do that. So the positive event process should be similar to the negative. It should be documented, it should be remembered. So something goes right, good. We notice that something's gone right, right? We take action to make the most of that, to maximize our gain. And we take action to preserve the process. We use the profit or the gain that we have to create production of more and better things. Oh, look, this is working. Let's write that down. Let's keep doing that. And then when it's all done, we sit down and we document it. You know, if there's a problem, if there's an incident, we have to document it and file it. But when things goes right, how often do we document it, put it away for further reference? So the positive side of Murphy's Law means that we should develop contingency planning for positive events, as well as for negative events. Let's plan for this contingency. Are you prepared in case something good happens? You know, it's a basic truth that in the process of self-improvement and spiritual growth and personal transformation and achieving our goals and so forth, it's a basic truth that the more we struggle against the various obstacles in our way, the more they become stronger and persistent. And this is true regardless of whether those obstacles are big physical things that we see out there or whether they're inner obstacles, like our fears and our situations and circumstances and our beliefs, you know, all equally important. So that's why things like the war on drugs and the war on terrorism and the struggle against injustice, they don't work because we're putting all our attention on what's wrong. It's doomed to failure as long as that's the context through which we perceive and approach them. Why should this be so? Why should fighting against something just serve to further empower it? Why is that? And it's because of the fact that our very fundamental nature is that we are creative beings. And whether we know it or not, whether we acknowledge it or not, whether we believe it or not, human beings are constantly creating. What are we creating? We're creating what we're thinking about. We're using our innate creative capacities every minute of every day, for good or for ill, whichever we're thinking about. This is the magic or potential horror of the power of our thought. So when we're resisting things, we're giving power to them. We're giving them attention and we're creating and recreating that which we are resisting. So that's why we turn around the phrase, I'll believe it when I see it. And we say, I'll see it when I believe it. And that's why we change the way we say, when we change the way we look at things, the things we look at change, right? When we say change your thinking, change your life. It's all about being conscious of what we're thinking. And turn the other cheek. Start thinking that more often when we say that. I don't like what I'm seeing here. I could turn the other cheek. So in Unity, we talk about the 4 V's of awakening, our awakening journey. So we move from victim to victor to vessel to verity, which means truth, of course. So a lot of us started out our lives being victims, didn't we? I stayed a victim till I was about 40. It's too long to be a victim. And so we think the world just doing it to us. There's nothing we can do, it's just happening. And then suddenly we get a hold of some kind of a philosophy that says, no, you can take charge of your life. And we do that and we have some success. And now we say, I'm a victor. But the victor consciousness still implies that there's something wrong in the world that we have to overcome, that we have to fight against. So we work a little more and we suspend judgment about the world and about each other. And we allow the world to be what it is. And then we become a vessel for the unfolding of good in our world. Now we're at vessel consciousness, and that's very good. But there's one even higher. And finally, we can move to vessel consciousness, or from vessel to verity or truth consciousness. And that's when we have the realization that everything really is the way it's supposed to be. That the universe actually is unfolding the way it is, despite our judgments and objections. And then we're truly free. So to sum that up, we could call those 4 steps as victim, God is doing it to me. Victor, God is doing it for me. Vessel, God is doing it through me. And verity, God is doing it as me. What a place of power that is. And so one of the most important verities or truths that we can discover, and for me was the life-changing discovery, was that we can take responsibility for our own lives, for our experience of life. And again, not blame, responsibility. And that's what gives us power. Because when we realize that we can create our circumstances, and even instead of feeling bad because we've created circumstances we don't like, but if we have that power to create, we can also uncreate and then recreate them the way we want. That's, to me, that's the most powerful lesson I could ever learn in my life, taking responsibility. And in order to have that power, I have to take responsibility. I can't blame God or my husband or my father or anybody else anymore. I have to take responsibility here. That's where our power comes from. And if we can't acknowledge that, we've just given our power away. So one of the people in the world who most strongly demonstrated that power, and we've talked about him before, is Viktor Frankl. And Viktor Frankl survived Auschwitz, and he did that by acknowledging that. And I have 3 slides from Viktor Frankl. He said, when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. There's always something that can be done. We're challenged to change ourselves. And how often do we say that? We can't change anybody else. This is the only place that we can make changes. And the second one, he said, is everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. And you know, when you think it, you couldn't think of anything more horrific than being in a Nazi concentration camp. But where most of the people there probably felt victimized, and his attitude was, how can I serve these other people? How can I make their experience a little less painful? Yeah, you can always control your reaction. And the third, and I see this one on the Unity, unity.org webpage, several times I've seen it. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. And you know, most people act as stimulus response machines. This happens, I do that. That happens, I do this. That's just the way it is. But in that tiny second of an interval between the stimulus, you can choose how to respond. I'm not going to respond the way I've always done that now. No knee-jerk reactions. That tiny space has infinite power. to choose our response, and therein lies our growth and our freedom. Viktor Frankl, in a lecture back in the 70s, he was teaching at university, and they were doing some studies, and they thought that if they interviewed about the university students, what's their primary goal in life, they thought they were going to say to get this education and make a lot of money. But what they discovered was 78% of students at the college level, their primary goal was to find purpose and meaning in life. Isn't that helpful? Another little incident, he was telling the students, when he was in his 70s, he began taking flying lessons. And what he learned from flying, and he applied it to human life, is if you're going to say flying from Vancouver to Campbell River, and the wind is blowing from the north, you're going to get blown off course. No, he's going, sorry, I'll get it right. He's going from Vancouver to Victoria, and the wind is blowing. No, that's right. I don't know, whatever it is. Yeah, the wind is blowing from the north. I'm looking at John and he's nodding. So, and so the wind's going to blow him further south than when to go. So he wants to go to Victoria. He needs to aim for Campbell River. That's it. And by the time he gets to Victoria, he'll be at the right level. And so he said, you know, you can do that. It's called crabbing. Great name, is it? You can do that. But he said that also goes for man. That we should aim for higher than our beliefs. Aim for more than what you can believe in. And do that with other people too. Expect more from other people than what you think they're going to give you. Because the crosswinds are going to blow them to where you think, right? Expect the best. And if we do that, we can make him capable of becoming what he can be. So that's why I don't let Eeyore hang out in my life too often. Because when we can recognize and acknowledge and experience the power that we have to direct and experience in our own lives, we can say gently and lovingly to anything that might previously have been an annoyance to us or a hindrance to us, I love you, goodbye. Turn the other cheek and walk away. That is really the only way you can turn anything around, by turning yourself around. Would you join me for a brief meditation? And let us just know that that power that we have to create is growing within us. Like a golden ball in our solar plexus. We allow it to expand, to move up into our heart, into our throats, our vocal cords, our brains. And we use our brains to connect with mind, infinite mind, all-powerful mind, all-knowing mind. The infinite wisdom of the One is always available. And we open ourselves to allow it to flow in and through our experience, always leaning on it, depending on it for answers that will change our perceptions and therefore change our world. So just breathe for a moment, being conscious of the wisdom, being conscious of infinite choice. Let's carry the acceptance of that wisdom into our next song.